Dzień dobry, witam Państwa serdecznie w kolejnym panelu Polsko-Polonijna Unia Gospodarcza. Agnieszka Maćkówka kłania się z tej strony. Dzisiaj na naszej antenie mamy Kanadę. Witamy Wojtka Śniegowskiego, prezesa Kanadyjsko-Polskiej Izby Gospodarczej. Romi Jaszczyński, Paih, Toronto, pracował dla Departamentu Handlu USA w ambasadzie. Jeśli bym coś przekręciła, to proszę mnie poprawiać. W ambasadzie amerykańskiej w Warszawie i w Kanadzie, w Ministerstwie Handlu Międzynarodowego dla rządu kanadyjskiego jako doradca oraz w sektorze lotniczym i obronnym. Paih, Toronto, witamy Romi. Mamy również Zacka Labieńca, Paih, Toronto, witamy. Krótko powiem, że 3 lata prowadził biuro Paih w Toronto, wcześniej pracował w bankowości dla jednych z większych banków w Kanadzie. Witam Panów serdecznie. Dzisiejszy temat naszej rozmowy to jest Doing Business in Canada. Panel będzie prowadzony w języku angielskim. Dla tych osób, które będą potrzebowały tłumaczenia, to oczywiście proszę przesłać maila na naszego maila ze strony internetowej ppug.com.pl oraz ewentualne pytania po programie, gdzie Panowie będą mogli przesłać odpowiedzi w najbliższym czasie. I teraz oddaję głos Wojtkowi. Stawiamy Cię na słuchanie. Witam Panów.
Witam wszystkich, także bez dłuższego przemówienia zapraszam Cię, Zacku. Zrobimy to w takim formacie, że najpierw będzie prezentacja, a potem porozmawiamy jeszcze, ewentualnie zadam parę pytań.
Nie ma problemu.
Wszyscy widzą prezentację?
Tak.
Tak jest.
Tak, super. No to okej, no to może zaczniemy od razu. I rozumiem, że wiecie po angielsku, to już zmieniamy język. First of all, thank you to everybody involved in this organization of this event. Pleasure to be here on behalf of the Polish Investment and Trade Agency in Toronto. I'll do a quick little intro and have my colleague Romi Jaszczyński follow up on some of the other topics. We'll dive into a little bit of what we do as a Polish Investment Trade Agency in Toronto. For those who are not familiar with PAIH, as the acronym we use, Polska Agencja Inwestycji Handlu, we'll give a little rundown of our operations as well as exact issues that we can help with in Toronto. So there are about 70 offices worldwide of the agency, are being focused on the Canadian market with Polish entrepreneurs.
A little bit louder, please. A little bit louder.
Okay. Is this a little bit better?
Yes.
So obviously our office is in Canada, in Toronto. We focus on helping Polish entrepreneurs enter the Canadian market with both products, services, joint ventures, any sort of opportunities that help increase their brand in Canada. So we act as a public consultancy. We, at the end of the day, are owned by the Ministry of Economic Development in Poland. 100% of the shares are Polish, so it's Polish taxpayers, Polish grants, Polish funding, and we support Polish business in Canada. We work very closely in the form of providing market analysis, trends, B2B contacts, B2C, arranging trade fairs, access to associations, and such. So we act as your sort of one-stop shop for doing business in Canada. We, whoops, sorry. Skipped a little bit over there. A little delay there. Just some basic macroeconomic information in Canada. For those who maybe don't know some of the main bits, we're part of the North American organization between the United States and Mexico, which is NAFTA 2.0 or USMCA, or, as depending which region you talk to. It's a large market, with Canada being a smaller percentage of it, as the population of Canada is approximately 37 million. When you compare that to Poland's 38 million and such a large geographical space, you can see the size of what Canada is and the markets across various regions, such as across the west in British Columbia to Montreal, a little bit further east of Toronto. Those are the regions that are the largest markets, and the quite drastic geographical differences. Just to give an example, between Toronto and British Columbia is about a 6-hour flight. The population, the currency, as you can tell, between Canada and Poland is about 1 to 3 PLN. COVID has made an impact on that, and it's quite a volatile change throughout the period. Currently, we have some of the lowest taxes in Canada, which are beneficial for Polish businesses to open up shop here. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in the presentation. Sticking with the macros, our GDP is about 1.7 trillion USD, which places us as the 10th largest economy in the world. Unemployment rate in 2018 was closer to 5.9%. Obviously, COVID has a largest drastic impact on that, which is hovering closer around 14% as a national level. The import-export is quite close between for surplus to deficit, which our largest traded partners being the US market. As you can tell by this little graphic here, it gives you an idea of how much import we do with some of our largest trading partners, with US controlling about 52% of our imports. When it comes to export, it's even a more drastic representation of our dependency on the US market. It's closer to around 76%. Looking at Poland's interrelationship in the import-export, as you can tell, it's quite a small 0.35% for import and around 0.13% for export. The relationship on a more defined level with Canada and Poland in 2018 was closer to 2.6 billion in trade. Now, looking at that, it's not a huge sum, but it's an ever-growing number. Something to be comparing it to years of 2013 to 2017, it's a cumulative average growth rate of about 54%, especially when it comes to import from Poland. So there's a drastic benefit for the surplus in trade for Poland, and it may be improving for Canada, but it's still a drastic difference. You can tell in 2.6 billion in 2017, out of that, Polish trade surplus with Canada amounted to about approximately 1.2 billion, which is a healthy sum. The prognosis for our trade is ever improving. Here we have a slide actually focusing on Ontario and Quebec, which is the two largest provinces, and therefore two are also largest trading partners between Canada and Poland. As you can tell, the trade balance year over year is a major increase. It's about 11.6% trade balance, for Ontario, and about 37.3% balance for Quebec. But you can tell that Quebec is becoming a larger player in that relationship, with improvements of export and import almost around 30% for both, with import from Poland closer to 40%. So it's a substantial change year over year from 2017 to 2018, and that has to do more with the aviation sector than any other sector. A summary of what it looks like in more real-time numbers for 2019 is the trade between Canada and Poland has crossed over the 3 billion Canadian mark, which is a 7.9 or approximately 8% increase year over year of the same period. Some of the exports, again, continue to grow. It's about 10.8%, and import from Canada is just on the negative 0.1%, or what we say relatively the same. Ontario imports, Ontario exports, just a little summary of some of the goods that are changed between the borders. Aircraft parts, food preparations, cleaning products, still hanging on top of the balance. Versus CETA implementation, which Romi will talk a little about later on. As some of the tariffs have been eliminated, you can see on the bottom of the charts where certain aspects are taking a larger role, such as parts from electric motors, generators, rotaries, brakes, service, or automotive parts. And that's increases of 2,000+ % growth year over year from 2017 to 2018. The specific characteristics that we try to promote and educate Polish entrepreneurs on, as most Polish entrepreneurs always inquire as sort of becoming a stepping stone or a bridge to the US, which is true, and it's a great way to eventually grow your business into the US market, but not to be omitted is Canada itself, which is a large demographic base of, like we said, 37 million, a very mature market with a proven product model, and a potential for Polish consumers to take advantage of the European culture and the Polish diaspora that already exists in the region. But other characteristics that do stand out include a competitive and secure business market. Canada is a member of G20, G7 states, and is always recognized as an economic, social, and political stable country. Banking and finance sectors is what we promote, especially in Toronto. It's become the fintech capital of North America, really, with AI being a particular segment that we focus in Toronto, as we call the Godfather of Toronto, is here in University of Toronto. We have a ever-growing video game and graphics in Vancouver, development AI sector in Montreal. So there's a large sectoral base in our three largest markets, and something that is growing at a faster rate, especially in tech in Toronto, than it is in larger markets such as the San Francisco Valley, New York, or even Seattle. So there's a lot of potential in those sectors. Quality of life, always highly ranked. G7 rankings, 4th among 34 OECD countries, one of the most multicultural societies in the world. Obviously, we talked about USMCA and NAFTA 2.0, as we call it, giving access to that bridge to the North American and Mexico markets. Total GDP of about 24 trillion USD. Top-ranked universities, and some of the best world-renowned government-centered programs, including SHRED and a startup visa, which helps Polish entrepreneurs set up shop and operate businesses in a more user-friendly and accelerated way. Opportunities from COVID, as we're still learning them, there are many that we've come to experience over the last 3 months. They are ever changing. As I said, it's a fluid and changing market. We have applications for the VR, fintech, blockchain, 5G technologies. We see gaming being an ever-growing sector as people gravitate towards staying at home and getting into the virtual space. There's the e-commerce applications, and something we work with our Polish companies becoming available to sell their products through partners here locally that integrate the e-commerce platform. There's opportunities in the building materials and modular construction area. Home repairs and renovations are something that peaked as some of the stores on DIY stores, do-it-yourself stores, indicate from Lowe's and Home Depots. A lot more purchase spending and consumer spending has been onto home renovations, interior design, people spending time in their lawns and renovating their bedrooms. So there's a lot of opportunity for lights, for furniture, ever-growing segment of the Polish manufacturing sector, smart city applications, and something we always focus on in our office here in Toronto is the food side, which is already a supply chain that is utilized by Polish producers, but has room to grow. So we focus on that opportunity, and we're ever dealing with importers and distributors to gauge what opportunities will lie in the next 2, 3, 6 months to a year, what products are in demand by consumer trends, and then applying that and poaching Polish companies that can fill that demand. Maybe I'll pass it over now, talk about some of the barriers to entry in the Canadian market.
Perfect. Thank you, Zach. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. Perfect. So I'm just going to speak a little bit about the barriers, like mentioned, the opportunities. I think the most important thing to realize is that Canada and Poland have a very similar population size. But if you look at Canada as a country, it's much larger, probably 10 to 15 times larger than Poland is. And this really plays into increasing logistics and distribution costs. So that's very important to realize when you're coming into Canada. If you compare Canada to the US as well, size-wise, we're similar, but again, the US has 10 times more people in it, right? They're around 300 or so, 300 plus million, while Canada has about 40 million. So if you're going to the US, a lot of times you would have a regional distributor, maybe Northeast, Southwest, and so on. In Canada, for the most part, if you're speaking with a distributor, it's very common for them to want exclusive rights because of the small market. So this is very important to consider. Another thing to also keep in mind is because we're a smaller market, most sectors have monopolies, or they'll have 2 or 3 major players. If you look at, for example, grocery stores or the supply chain for grocery stores or telecom, you'll have 2 or 3 major players that really dictate the demand for the market. So that's also very important to keep in mind. And as far as food, if you're in the meat sector, we do get a lot of companies that deal with meat, so we thought it'd be important to mention this. At this time, you can only export from Poland pork products, so no other products can make it into the Canadian market from Poland at the time. And it's also important to realize that a lot of distributors here, I think this is common everywhere, expect you to have a very well thought out business plan and market strategy, as well as a budget. And you also have to be ready not to make any ROI for a year or two. So the sales cycle is very long, regardless of the sector you're in. So it's a very mature and competitive market, and the ties are very close as well. So most players within the market, because it's so small, they know each other very well, and they're not as open to outside players, especially from Poland, because in some sectors, because there's so many small players in Canada, the Polish brand isn't as well known. And I would say this applies to the vast majority of business in Canada. There's a few sectors such as maybe food or IT, and construction materials where Poland and its brands and materials are known as high quality, but in other ones may not be well known. So that's something to keep in mind. And while we're on barriers, I guess we could also talk about CETA, which is the free trade agreement that was signed between Canada and the EU. So transitioning from barriers, let's talk about some opportunities that CETA affords. What CETA does in sum is it eliminates over 99% of tariffs between Canada and the European Union. So Poland is included in that. The vast majority of tariffs that are still in place, or tariff rate quotas, are for agricultural products. So if you're not sending agricultural products, you're most likely covered by a 0% tariff rate. Now, it's also very important to remember that even though there is a free trade agreement and that there are 0% tariffs between Canada and Poland, it does not mean your product that you're sending from Poland to Canada qualifies for 0%. There's certain requirements that have to be met, and this changes by each tariff line. So from product to product, the requirements are different. So if you have any questions about this, if you want to know if your product qualifies, we'd be happy to help you and or refer you to someone who can help you. And just as an example of some of the tariff rates prior to the implementation of CETA and post CETA, you can see here, seafood had a 20% tariff rate. Some products, manufacturing products, had tariff rates as high as 14%. So this really makes your product more competitive on the Canadian market, and it also makes it easier to send. All you need is a declaration of origin. So you don't need a certificate of origin like you required even between US and Canada up until now, obviously with the USMCA. All you need is a declaration of origin, which is a 2 or 3 sentence document. It's an affidavit stating that your products do qualify, but make sure if you're filling this document out that your products do in fact qualify, because if they don't, then there's large penalties that you can pay through the Customs and Border Services agencies here in Canada. And one more thing, although there is CETA, there is this free trade agreement, and you can have your products move freely between Canada and Europe, there are still other barriers in the form of standards. And the certifying bodies that are most popular in Canada are UL and CSA. And these markings are similar to the CE markings in Europe, although a major difference is in Europe, some of the CE markings you can put on the product yourself, and you sort of attest to the fact that it meets that standard. With the Canadian regulations, it's a little bit different. If you're getting tested through CSA or UL, you'll have to do it through some sort of laboratory or certifying body. And even if you do have these markers, there are other government regulations that you may have to follow and meet to be able to sell your product in Canada. So if you have any questions about this, we also have contacts in these organizations, and we have a little bit of experience of getting products to Canada, especially ones that require certification and testing. So we'd be happy to help. So that's pretty much it. We just wanted to give you guys a quick overview. Again, thank you to the union and also to Wojtek for hosting us. If you guys have any questions, you can reach us at these email addresses. And I believe we now have a Q&A with Mr. Śniegowski.
Okay, so we're moving to the meeting part of our today's get-together. So maybe I'm going to ask you some maybe practical questions, because this was a very comprehensive presentation, but from your practical experience, what are the Polish companies that are trying to do business in Canada most surprised about?
I think, it depends on which sectors you're looking at, but generally it's the costs, right? I think that's something that they forget about, that it's not just about having a product that is great, it's actual marketing it here and having the funds for advertising, for distribution, and setting that aside, not just from getting the product here, but then getting it off the shelves is very important. And most distributors don't partake in that part of the relationship. So it's up to the Polish producer to levy up to hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to make sure the product comes off the shelf. And if it doesn't, then it falls under the books of the Polish producers. No one's going to take responsibility for that locally here, and I think that's something that they have to understand. That the cost is still, once your product's here, you still have to spend a little bit, a few more dollars to help it come off the shelves.
And even, and as Zack mentioned, there's the cost, and also with even before you make a deal, I think one of the biggest surprises is how long the sales cycle is, because it's such a tight-knit community. It's normal, take 1, 2, or 3 years to break in, and you have to always be present at the trade shows, at the conferences, at the major events. You always have to be in contact and kind of break into that network. Otherwise, it's very difficult. You might make a sale, but it won't be a continuous cycle of sales.
In my experience, there's a lot of companies that are just looking for local representative, and without providing any marketing budget, as you mentioned, Zack, they're really having problem because they cannot really enter the market in true fashion. So those are very good remarks, because people really need to understand that this is a totally new market, and you have to gain it. You have to gain the entry. We talked mostly about commerce right now, but also CETA allows for government procurement as well, that Polish companies actually can apply. And so if you could, any of you can talk about the procurement and how to actually take advantage of government procurement in Canada.
Romi?
Sure. So through CETA, in a practical format, there's 2 ways. So Canadian companies that are bidding in Europe, they can find all the opportunities on Tenders Electronic Daily, TED. It's an online system that has everything listed. Every single public procurement that's available in the European Union is on that website. Now, Canada is supposed to have the equivalent, but they haven't built it yet, or it's not out yet, right? So there's a few different websites. There's Merck's, there's Buy and Sell. There's a few different websites where you can actually find the actual tenders. As far as bidding on them, if you're a Polish company, your best chances, although, in theory, the market's opened up, your best chances are if you have a local partner to bid on that with, as well as there's certain provisions like national security or provisions that are built in that limit what projects you can bid on based on the value of the project. So I think it's around 200,000 euros, around there, and under, Canadians can't bid on because it's sort of reserved to support the SMEs in the given market. So Polish companies can't bid on certain projects in Canada, for example, that are below a certain amount, because those are sort of reserved for smaller companies to support smaller Canadian companies. So there are protections built in for SMEs, national security, that you can't bid on. But as far as where to find projects and so on, all the projects are online, and having a local partner is always the best method and way to increase your chances of success. And as well as reaching out to our agency, we also do a little bit of advocacy, and we'll support, the bid or tender on the Canadian market. Yeah.
So basically, if you want to utilize the bids, it's great to apply on your end. But if you really want to have a full sort of 360 approach to it, contact our office, and we'll be happy to help you not only understand the bid itself, the procedure, get you access to the government associations that can help you understand and also leverage our network to get partners locally that can help you make the proper bids. At the end of the day, it's still who you know, and that's what we're here for, is to help alleviate some of that unknown on the ground.
Yeah, exactly. I think the local knowledge is very instrumental, because there are all kinds of restrictions, as you mentioned, but also there are differences between the different levels of government. When we as a Canada-Poland Chamber of Commerce assisted the fact-finding mission from Poland, when they were working on the procurement legislation in Poland, they were trying to look at the other jurisdictions, and they were here in Canada. We experienced that the information, that it was a difference between what province offered and city offered. They have different sometimes requirements. So the local knowledge is extremely important.
Yeah, actually, it's important, if I can add, something you mentioned really well is, as I think people forget, it's almost harder dealing with provinces, municipalities, than it is between countries. So I think Polish companies forget that working in Ontario, it's like working in a totally different country when you're dealing with BC. Regulation standards and what the provisions entail for procurement are completely different. So, that's something to always keep in mind. They change from province to province. Doesn't matter. And they have more almost of power from the federal government when it comes to those rules and regulations. So it's really about getting the local understanding and then access to local associations and government to help support those procurement opportunities.
And also with the procurement piece, when a free trade agreement or any law is implemented, you still have to implement it with the various public service ministries, right? So, even though we have CETA, some of the border agents still might not be implementing it properly, whether it be in Canada or the European Union, right? I remember at the beginning of it, some didn't even know what the certificate of origin from Canada was, because maybe it hasn't trickled down yet. So same with the procurement piece, the different provinces, they're in, it's 2-3 years into the agreement, but they're still implementing it. So, everyone is aware of it and how to, from a process standpoint, actually implement and activate it. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, exactly. People don't know in Poland, because Poland is sort of one country and we are a federation, that there are barriers between each province. CETA sort of goes around it because every province is a signatory to the agreement, so it's easier. But sometimes it's very difficult to do business between Ontario and Quebec. There are limitations, for example, of you want to send skilled laborers. They have to have, actually, in a lot of cases, special authorization from Quebec, because Ontario licenses are not being recognized.
Yeah, we treat Quebec as a separate country almost.
It is, right? You have the different language, different culture. You almost have to approach it differently.
Yeah, we have Canadian businesses that shy away from doing business in Quebec for that reason as well, right? Not from the market opportunities there. They have a large demographic. They have a large population. Very similar trends. It's just that the cost to barrier is expensive, and to change everything around to abide by certain rules. Standards is costly, and that's just the same thing for Canadian companies, and we try to preach that to Polish companies. It's know your client, know your customer, know your demographic, know your local market base, and sometimes that means, yes, spending a little bit more because you fit into the Quebec region, or you fit more of a lifestyle and climate in Quebec, in British Columbia. So that's what we help navigate here. So we act as that sort of consultancy and concierge to help monitor that market. And if we don't have the answers, like Romi mentioned before, we'll find them for you, whether it be utilizing like your agency, like Polish Canadian Chamber, Wojtek, or dealing with some of our local partners here. We'll get out and get those answers that we might not be able to right away provide information to.
Absolutely. And there's one more thing worth mentioning as far as Quebec is concerned. For some Polish businesses, it may be easier to do business in Quebec because of the law. It's a basically similar law to the law in Europe, in Poland, which is codified. And in the rest of the Canada is based on precedents, just Anglo-Saxon system. So even that is so different. Okay, now practically, so from what we're talking about so far, I think that the practical information from that is that you should establish business. If you want to do business in Canada, you should establish your own business in Canada. Not just rely on middlemen, or it will be probably the most practical thing if you establish business in Canada. How to do that?
You know what, Wojtek, I think just going back, even that depends. You know, I mean, if you're brand new to the market, I mean, the agent or distributor route might be the better way to go. It really depends on your business and what your end goal is. If you're a service provider, maybe it may make more sense to set up shop in Canada. But if you have a product, I would say most of the companies will go the agent distributor method until they're established enough and have enough of a supply chain or demand here that it would warrant establishing a presence in the market. Yeah. But as far as setting up shop, Zack, I think you've had more experience with this side of things.
Yeah, generally it's a case-by-case basis. I mean, we've been now as the Polish Investment Trade Agency in Toronto. We've been here for almost 3 years. It'll be 3 years in July. We've drawn on past experiences prior to our office, and then our current sort of experience states that we find in different sectors, different methods work. When it comes to tech, comes to services, it's easier to set up shop here and abide by business development, set up an address, because you can do most of your work still from Poland. Business development, if you're trying to outreach, it makes sense to have an agent locally. It's still done the old school fashioned way. Maybe COVID will change things, we don't know exactly, but soon time will tell. But it still makes sense to have a person on the ground, sort of take on the ambassador agent role, knock door to door, make some phone calls, show up at trade shows, be present, and get that business that way. When it comes to the food sector, we've gone the route of short-term success is dealing directly with a distributor. Long-term success, having an agent locally, gives access to more market share by dealing with multiple distributors, not having an exclusive distributor relationship, which costs money for the distributor to also engage in marketing, which we talked about before. You take the onus off of the distributor, put it on an agent. Working on that relationship gives them the opportunity to work with multiple distributors and therefore different sectors to engage. So there's different opportunities. We've had success with a few in the food, a few in the tech. But again, in short, it's really depending on the product, the angle, the amount of funds being utilized, and sort of a relationship that you want to develop to short-term or long-term success, really.
And also, Wojtek, I guess on this topic, sort of a middle ground or program that's available to foreign companies. Canada has a non-resident importer program. So, this allows you to have a presence in Canada without actually having a physical presence. So you can act as an importer of record for your own products without having to deal with or having the onus of import on a distributor or on an agent. So it may make it easier to find partners, because a lot of times when we're dealing with distributors here and trying to pitch them Polish companies, they don't want to deal with the import. They don't want to deal with the liability involved without the paperwork, the cost, right? So what a Polish company can do is they set up as a non-resident importer. They have a distribution agreement maybe with a warehouse, and the Polish company itself takes care of all the paperwork, import, and so on, and their product just sits in a warehouse and then ships out from there. So they have someone for that. So that's also another solution, and we can help with more information on that or setting that up as well if you'd like, or if a company watching this would like. Yeah.
So there's actually many different ways and approaches, and it has to be tailored to the particular interests and opportunities. Yeah, so I guess this will be most of the things that we needed to talk about. One more question. I don't know if this is a fair question to you guys, because I don't know how much experience in doing business in Poland you have, but as much as you know, how much easier is to do business in Canada, if it's a truth, even in terms of reporting, in terms of registering the business, and do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, registering a business in Canada can be done within 24 hours, right? Ease of doing business as stated earlier in our presentation, we're ranked. Well, Canada's ranked as top ease of doing business, top 20 in the world. Poland's, I think, maybe 5, 6 places behind. So if you look at some of the agencies that do the rankings, and they're quite accurate. Not a huge difference. We help Polish companies on quite a routine basis open up shop here. And again, it comes down to cost and how quickly you want to do it. Some agencies downtown will charge a little bit more. Some teams outside of GTA will charge a little bit less. You're generally looking at anywhere from $1,500 to $2,000 to just open up or incorporate federally. There is again that relationship between federal and provincial incorporation. Between the monopolistic approach of provinces, you still have to register within each province, name searches, register your names. So there's some costs, ticky-tacky costs that get added up. But generally, it's quite simple. At the end of the day, it could all be done within a couple of days. We've never encountered any problems with registering companies here. And in reference to Poland, we don't generally do too much ourselves. We engage our head HQ in Warsaw, which again handles the foreign direct investment once we attract it, and opens up any shop. But we draw on the references, we use referrals, and the companies from Canada that we work with, that we have a relationship with, haven't complained yet. Maybe it's a good thing, it's a bad thing, but we haven't heard anything bad about it, so we'll take it as a good sign.
Yeah, there's definitely differences, dealing with the public service in both countries. I think, Canada has a little bit more things online and streamlined than Poland does, but I mean, Poland's still a great place.
Into government bureaucracy.
But Poland's still a great place to do
another hour webinar, right?
Yeah.
And if you're looking...
I would also like to add that, if you register a company in Canada, you can register in any province, but you can actually register it's federally, so it would be, and different provinces have a different requirements as far as, for example, board of directors.
Yes.
In Ontario, you have to have 20% at least of Canadian citizens in your board of directors, and in British Columbia, for example, none. So, and yet it's going to have the same validity as federally registered corporation in the whole Canada. So it's good to get good advice from. Sometimes it's better to spend money or talk to you guys, and because I encounter people who come here, find the cheapest lawyer, and they're getting the advice that they paid for. So.
Yeah. It all falls back onto understanding your market, right? You want to come into a market like Canada, which is a mature, stable, integrated supply chains that are developed over 50, 60 years, where Poland is just on the cusp of utilizing that. You have countries like Spain, Italy, Germany, France that have been setting up shop here for 50, 60 years. And they're aware of that. And they've jumped onto those supply chains, and it's much easier doing business for them. For Poland to now enter that market, the entry barrier in itself is cost. So sometimes trying to get the cheapest, fastest solution is, like I said, a short-term success. But we are here to develop a brand, a made in Poland brand, and we want long-term success. We understand that governments will go through a change, 2, 3 years, 4 years, whatever it may be, elections, people change, but the Polish brand should not. That quality should be recognized for foreseeable future. So what we're trying to do is set up stepping stones for companies that will be able to lead to a template of success for a long term. And that means, yes, spending a little bit more money. Yes, maybe doing a little bit more research. Yes, getting information before you come to Canada, setting up a business plan, a template in Poland before you just decide to sell your product and say, okay, I did my part, I made some money, I'm happy, and I'm moving on. We want to understand that, yes, that's a short-term success, but let's develop it as a whole. Let's get into the legal way of doing it, the proper way of doing it, professional way of doing it, and get you access to a reasonable cost benefit, and see what we can do for the foreseeable future. That's really, at the end of the day, what we're here for. And we'll get those answers. We'll connect them with the proper lawyers. We'll make sure that we have 3, 4, 5. As you know, Wojtek, ourselves, we try to connect with as many people, give them access to as many services as possible that suit their business as an SME, as a startup, whatever it may be, and then take the opportune channels for success. And I think really at the end of the day, it comes to using our office, but using the Polish Canadian Chamber, every embassy, consulate in Canada, working together as a whole to really unify what we do, because we haven't had that advantage of Germany or France or some of the other players. So it's now or never. Seed us here to play. Let's utilize it. Let's educate all our Polish producers, entrepreneurs about the opportunities and give them a full access. And that's really what we're here for.
Yeah, and I think the classic example too is, a lot of times Polish companies or even Polonia, they're very comfortable within Polonia. So our role as Paih is to bring Polonia and Poland to the mainstream. So a lot of times, even food companies, for example, classic example, they'll want to sell to Polonia stores. But why limit yourself to Polonia stores? Let's get you in the big three, in the mainstream, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Whether that be through private label or your original brand, but that's sort of the thing we're trying to break off of, is go mainstream with Made in Poland.
Yeah, because Polonia market is fairly small. One last question. I read somewhere that in States, for example, Polish people as such has much better recognition than Poland as a brand, especially in business. Do you experience similar thing here in Canada?
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I think that's a fair thing to say. Or if we're talking about Polish as a brand or Polish people, I think with Polish brand, we don't have a unicorn. We did Solaris was our unicorn. We had some big company names that have been unfortunately bought out by other EU countries. Sorry?
For example, Spanish, like Solaris.
Yeah, Solaris is an example. We try to, at the end of the day, we know how this works. I think we look at Canada as an example. Look at Shopify. That put Canada on the map. It places Ottawa on the map. A city where it's renowned for public administration and government has become now a player in the tech space, hiring the most amount of STEM students and graduates in all of Canada, just alongside of Toronto. So it's important to have a unicorn, a player like that raises an entire brand of a country. Now, Polish individuals are well-renowned. We have no problem talking about developers, the best programmers, producers, food quality. People generally understand that Polish people are hardworking, very cultural-driven, abide by their roots, and are very, 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 I don't want to say stubborn, but strong-minded. And that in itself is a benefit. Where we find the drawback is that also they're so hardworking and so hard-minded that what we've lacked, and that comes back to a history of Poland, but is the vision, is the execution of a larger plan. And that's, I think, where we're trying to say, okay, selling it for a profit is great, but you can also maybe apply it to different angles, different market opportunities, and grow it further within Poland and then expanding it on a national, global level. That's where we want that unicorn to pop up, something that we can really promote. And one of them is already in place, and we talk about it. It's a game developer in Poland that many people know, and it's something that we talk about. We highlight a lot. Not many people are aware that it's even a Polish brand. There's a lot of cosmetics companies that don't necessarily market themselves as Polish. So that's something that we try to educate Canadians on. Part of that is what our office does. And then promote the smaller up-and-ups, the coming-up companies that play in that market, in that region, because the opportunity is there to give them the benefit. Canadian companies that are already doing business with Polish companies know this, but the general population of Canada does not. We still associate with, Polish vodka, Polish beer, Polish pierogies, which is great. We're always going to be proud of that. There's no point in being ashamed of something that we're really good at, but there's so many things that we still have to show. And that's where we prop up those companies, prop up the names. And like I said, it's all about unifying a brand and standing up and talking about it. And because we have such a high level of Polish individuals in high level positions in corporations in Canada, now is the time and ever to utilize them as well, is to bridge an entire connection and say, let's work together, let's give an opportunity, let's give back to the country that we're from and to the people that haven't had the ability to be entrepreneurs except for the last 20 or 30 years, really, and give them that stepping stone help as other countries have had. So really, it is true that the Polish brand is not recognized. Polish individuals and people are more recognized and renowned. But I think it's also onto the people who are here, such as ourselves, to talk about it, promote it, find that unicorn, find that brand, and really push as much as we can.
It's like the Italians. We were talking to an Italian person who owns a business in Toronto, and he was saying, like when his parents arrived, they wouldn't even teach the kids sometimes Italian. They would hide their Italianness. But now, I mean, it's like cool to be Italian in a way, like it's a branding.
Yep.
It's a brand, so we have to do the same.
I think that happened to many communities. I remember we were talking to the policeman, Chuck Conkel, who was here, and in school he wasn't admitting to be Polish because they were actually being bullied because of being different. So it's a different time. This policy of multiculturalism that we have in Canada since 1975 changed things. Now when you meet somebody, the first thing out of their mind after what's your name is where you're from. Yeah. And even if you say that you're born here, they're going to ask you, okay, but where is your family from? So that's
I think people forget last names. Yeah, exactly. Jaszczyński. Once they see that, they know right away. But it's important to realize that Canada is a country of many countries. Canada is a culture of many cultures. It doesn't have its own real culture as well. It's regarded as the most multicultural country in the world for a reason. And as you mentioned, Wojtek, admitting you're Polish wasn't something that people were able to do when I came to Canada. I wasn't able to do. It wasn't until maybe the 2000s that people started recognizing it, and you were proud to start talking about it a little bit more. You don't want to be made fun of, you want to be poked at. And that's really when we realized the last 5-6 years, to the point where I realized, and in Romi's in our office, is people come to us saying, you guys have the best programs, best developers, such smart hard workers, quality of goods that come from Poland. When dealing with customer service, and customer services we didn't touch up too much on, but customer service is such a big key in North American markets, and it's still in development in Europe. But Poland itself has now really stood out for customer service. We have companies here that say, I can call somebody from Poland at 3 p.m. local time, and they'll answer in Poland and get on and answer my questions, or get on the program software and fix any solutions I may need. And something that you're like, wow, yeah, that's generally how we approach it. They understand that it's the North American way of doing business, and I think speaking English, education, nothing compares to the talent pool, and that's our number one asset. Our number one commodity is still our people in Poland. That's our tool. That's what we promote the most.
I think we also have to sort of overcome initial branding of products from Poland. A lot of companies were producing very high quality product, but they were marketing as a made in Italy. For example, furniture. Claire was selling it as an Italian product. So we heard ourselves in or delayed the marketing of Poland as a brand. Okay, guys, thank you very much. I think this was very comprehensive and informative. Hopefully, people watching us will have some more questions, and we provided your emails. Polska, Polonia, Unia Gospodarcza would also will get questions if we need it, and we'll be answering them as they come along.
Yeah, definitely. Any questions you may have, please feel free to share. We can happily share our presentation. Everyone has access to our emails. We're not going anywhere. Working from home still, but
hopefully we can go. Hopefully we can get a beer soon, all of us.
Exactly.
Thank you, guys. That was very interesting and really important for us, our organization. Thank you, Romi. Thank you, Zack. Thank you, Wojciech. Ja jeszcze po polsku chciałam powiedzieć naszym słuchaczom, którzy nie rozumieją dokładnie lub nie znają języka angielskiego, jeżeli chcielibyście mieć tłumaczenie dzisiejszego programu, proszę o przesłanie informacji na naszego maila, którego weźmiecie ze strony Polsko-Polonijna Unia Gospodarcza. Dzisiaj na naszej antenie gościli panowie Romi Jaszczyński, Paih Toronto, Zack Labieniec, Paih Toronto, Wojciech Śniegowski, Kanadyjsko-Polska Izba Gospodarcza. I tematem naszego spotkania było Doing Business in Canada. Myślę, że wiele naszych członków chciałoby zrobić w Kanadzie interes, dowiedzieć się o szczegółowych informacjach dotyczących tego, czym się zajmują. Prosimy o przesyłanie do nas zapytań albo bezpośrednio do panów. Tak, Wojtku?
Krótko na koniec. Rozmawialiśmy dzisiaj po angielsku, ale obaj panowie mówią doskonale po polsku, więc możecie bez problemu zadawać pytania.
Tak,
jeszcze raz dziękujemy i mam nadzieję, dziękuję, że mieliście Państwo czas i ochotę tu z nami się spotkać. Dziękuję Wojtku za zaproszenie panów i mam nadzieję, że do usłyszenia.
No,
do zobaczenia, mam nadzieję.
I do zobaczenia również. Pozdrawiam, dziękuję.
Nawzajem, dziękuję, do widzenia.
Do widzenia wszystkim. Cześć.